The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in February, addressed to me in bold red letters that screamed urgent, HOA violation notice. And I knew my quiet life in northern Maine was about to get a whole lot more complicated. I stood there in my driveway, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air, staring at the paper like it might suddenly make sense if I squinted hard enough. According to the Pinecrest Hills Homeowners Association, I was being fined $1,500 for unauthorized storage of commercial equipment in violation of community aesthetic standards. The equipment in question: my snowplow attachment and snow blower, sitting exactly where they had been for the past 3 winters in my open garage. My name is Brandon Whitmore, and I bought my property on Maple Ridge Road in Caribou, Maine, 4 years ago specifically because I wanted space and freedom. The house sat on 2 acres of land with plenty of room for my workshop, my truck, and yes, my snow removal equipment. Living in Maine meant dealing with serious winter weather, and anyone with half a brain knew that snow removal equipment was not optional. It was survival gear. The fact that someone had the audacity to call it a violation was absurd enough to make me laugh, except I was too angry to find any humor in it. I marched back inside, tracking snow across my mudroom floor, and tossed the letter onto my kitchen table. My golden retriever, Max, looked up from his bed with concern, sensing my mood. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number listed on the letterhead for the HOA management office. A chipper voice answered after 2 rings. Pinecrest Hills HOA, this is Deborah speaking. How may I help you today? Yeah, hi. My name is Brandon Whitmore. I just received a violation notice about snow removal equipment, and I think there has been some kind of mistake. Let me pull up your account, Mr. Whitmore. Can you provide your address? 42 Maple Ridge Road. I heard typing on a keyboard, then a pause that stretched too long. Yes, here we are. The violation was reported by our Community Standards Chairwoman, Patricia Newsome. She conducted a drive-through inspection last week and noted several properties in violation of our covenant restrictions. Look, I need to stop you right there. I have never been part of any HOA. When I bought this property, there was no mention of any homeowners association. I specifically made sure of that before I signed anything. Deborah's voice took on a patient, rehearsed quality that made my blood pressure rise. Mr. Whitmore, according to our records, your property falls within the boundaries of Pinecrest Hills, which means you are subject to our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. These were filed with the county in 2018. I bought my house in 2021. There was nothing in my deed about an HOA. Sometimes these things can be overlooked during the sale process, but that does not negate your responsibility as a property owner within our jurisdiction. The fine stands, and payment is due within 30 days. If you would like to dispute this, you can request a hearing with the board, but I should warn you that rarely results in the fine being waived. I felt my jaw clench. I want that hearing. How do I request it? I can schedule you for our next board meeting, which is 3 weeks from today. You will receive a confirmation email with the details. Is there anything else I can help you with? No, that will be all. I hung up before she could give me another rehearsed response. I spent the rest of that day digging through my property documents. Everything I had from the purchase showed no HOA involvement whatsoever. My title insurance paperwork made no mention of any covenants or restrictions. I had specifically asked my real estate agent about HOAs because I had heard horror stories from friends in other states. She had assured me that this property was free and clear, completely independent. That evening I drove around my neighborhood, really looking at it for the first time in months. Maple Ridge Road was a rural stretch with houses spaced far apart, Some properties had horses, others had small farms. My neighbor to the east, Mr. Henderson, had an auto repair shop on his land. Mrs. Chen to the west ran a pottery business from her barn. None of this screamed strict HOA community to me. I had always assumed Pinecrest Hills was the newer development about a mile south, where the houses were cookie-cutter colonials with manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. I pulled into the gas station on the corner and decided to ask some questions. The attendant, a kid named Tyler who had graduated from the local high school 2 years ago, was restocking candy bars. "Hey, Tyler, you know anything about an HOA around here called Pinecrest Hills?" He looked up, confused. "You mean that development off Route 1? My cousin lives there. Says the HOA is super strict. They fined him for having the wrong color curtains or something crazy like that. You know where their boundaries are? I think it is just that subdivision. Why? Somebody is claiming my property is part of their HOA, but I have never heard of them until today." Tyler shook his head. "That does not sound right, man. Your place is way up Maple Ridge. That is not part of any development. My dad has lived here his whole life, and he always talks about how Maple Ridge is the old part of town, before all the planned communities showed up." This confirmed my suspicion. Something was seriously wrong here, and I was not about to pay $1,500 for a violation I should not even be subject to. I thanked Tyler and headed home, already planning my next move. The following morning, I drove to the Aroostook County Courthouse and Registry of Deeds. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Alina with reading glasses on a chain, helped me request copies of all the documents related to my property. We went back through decades of records. There was no mention of any HOA covenants, no restrictions, nothing that would indicate my land had ever been part of a planned community. "When was this HOA supposedly established?" Alina asked. The woman on the phone said 2018. Alina pulled up another set of records on her computer. "Here is the filing for Pinecrest Hills. Let me check the legal description and boundaries." Her eyes moved across the screen, and then she pulled up a map. According to this, Pinecrest Hills encompasses parcels 47 through 92 on the south side of Route 1. Your property is parcel 14 on Maple Ridge Road. You are not even close to their boundaries. Can you print that for me? Absolutely. You might also want a certified copy of your deed and the map showing your property boundaries. If someone is claiming jurisdiction over your land incorrectly, you will want documentation. I left the courthouse with a folder full of papers and a growing sense of righteous anger. This was not just a simple mistake. Someone at that HOA had either deliberately tried to expand their territory, or they were so incompetent they could not read a property map. Either way, I was not paying that fine. The board meeting was scheduled for the first Thursday in March at the Pinecrest Hills Community Center, a fancy building at the entrance to their development that probably cost more than my entire house. I arrived 15 minutes early with my folder of documents and a determination to set things straight. The parking lot was already half full, and I recognized the bureaucratic atmosphere the moment I walked through the doors. Everything was beige and sterile, with motivational posters about community values on the walls. A folding table near the entrance had a sign and sheet. I wrote my name and took a seat in the back row of the meeting room. About 30 other people were scattered around, most looking either bored or irritated. Clearly, I was not the only one with a grievance. At exactly 7 o'clock, 5 people walked to the front table and took their seats. The woman in the center was probably in her late 50s, with an aggressive blonde bob haircut and a face that looked like it had never smiled without calculating something first. She tapped a gavel on the table. "Good evening, everyone. I am Patricia Newsome, chairwoman of the Pinecrest Hills HOA board. We will be conducting business in the order listed on tonight's agenda. First up, we have pool maintenance bids, followed by landscaping contract renewals, and then we will hear from property owners with scheduled appointments." I sat through 45 minutes of the most mind-numbing bureaucratic discussion I had ever witnessed. They debated the difference between eggshell white and cream for the community center trim paint for 20 minutes alone. By the time they got to individual appointments, I was ready to walk out just from sheer boredom. "Brandon Whitmore, property 42 Maple Ridge Road," Patricia called out, reading from a paper in front of her. I stood and walked to the front, my folder in hand. Up close, Patricia had the kind of eyes that enjoyed finding fault in others. She looked at me like I was already guilty. "Mr. Whitmore, you requested this hearing to dispute a violation fine for unauthorized storage of commercial equipment. Is that correct?" "It is, but my dispute is more fundamental than that. I am here to tell you that my property is not part of this HOA and never has been." A murmur went through the crowd. Patricia's expression did not change. "Mr. Whitmore, our records clearly show that your property falls within our jurisdiction. Then your records are wrong." I opened my folder and pulled out the documents. This is a certified copy of the Pinecrest Hills HOA filing from 2018, complete with the legal description of your boundaries. This is a certified map from the county showing those boundaries. And this is my property deed with my parcel number. As you can see, my property is parcel 14 on Maple Ridge Road. Your HOA jurisdiction covers parcels 47 through 92 on the south side of Route 1. I am not even in the same area. I laid the papers on the table in front of her. Patricia picked them up, her mouth forming a thin line as she scanned them. The other board members leaned in to look. "There must be some mistake in the county records," Patricia said finally. "There is no mistake. I verified this with the Registry of Deeds. Multiple clerks confirmed it. My property has never been part of any HOA. You have no authority to fine me for anything." One of the male board members, a bald man with thick glasses, spoke up. "Patricia, if his parcel is not listed in our covenant filing, then technically he is correct. We would not have jurisdiction." Patricia's face was turning an interesting shade of red. "This neighborhood has been expanding, and we have been working to bring adjacent properties into compliance with community standards. You cannot just decide to expand your territory without proper legal process," I said, keeping my voice level despite my anger. "You definitely cannot fine people who are not part of your HOA. I want this fine rescinded immediately, and I want written confirmation that you will not contact me again." "I will need to consult with our attorney," Patricia said tersely. "You do that. But I am not paying this fine, and if you try to place a lien on my property or take any other action, I will be the one contacting an attorney. Are we clear?" The room was silent. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue further, but the other board members were shaking their heads. Finally, she spoke through gritted teeth. "The fine will be suspended pending legal review. We will contact you with our decision. Make sure you do." I gathered my papers and walked out, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on my back. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that after careful review, they had determined that my property was indeed within their extended jurisdiction zone, and that the fine not only stood, but had increased to $2,000 due to continued non-compliance and failure to appear at the mandatory remediation deadline. I read the letter 3 times, each reading making me angrier. They had completely ignored the evidence I presented. They were either delusional or gambling that I would not fight back. I picked up my phone and called the only attorney I knew personally, a guy named Mark Davidson who had helped me with my house purchase. "Mark, I need some advice about a legal situation." "Sure, Brandon. What is going on?" I explained the entire situation, from the initial fine to the board meeting to this new letter. Mark listened without interrupting. "So they are claiming some kind of extended jurisdiction zone now?" Mark asked. "Apparently. Is that even a thing?" "Not unless it was properly filed and recorded with the county, and definitely not if it contradicts their original covenant filing. This sounds like they are making things up as they go. You have a couple of options. You can ignore them completely since they have no legal standing, or you can take proactive action and sue for declaratory judgment." "What is that?" "Basically, you ask a judge to officially declare that their HOA has no jurisdiction over your property. That way, it is settled once and for all, and they cannot keep harassing you." "How much would that cost?" "Filing fees and my time, probably around $1,500 to $2,000 to start." "But if we win, and we absolutely should based on what you have told me, we can request that they pay your attorney fees and costs. Judges do not like it when organizations try to assert authority they do not have. Let us do it. I am tired of this nonsense." Mark agreed to take the case, and within a week, we had filed a lawsuit in Aroostook County Superior Court. The complaint was straightforward. I was asking for a declaratory judgment that my property was not subject to the Pinecrest Hills HOA covenants, an order prohibiting them from taking any action against me, and recovery of my attorney fees and costs. The HOA had 30 days to respond. When their answer came, it was a piece of work. Their attorney, a firm from Portland called Henderson and Associates, argued that my property was historically and geographically connected to the Pinecrest Hills development, and that I was attempting to evade reasonable community standards. They claimed that even though my parcel was not explicitly listed in the original filing, the spirit and intent of the HOA was to encompass the entire neighborhood. Mark actually laughed when he read it to me over the phone. "This is one of the weakest legal arguments I have seen in years." They are basically admitting they have no actual jurisdiction, but hoping the judge will give it to them anyway. "So we will win." "I would bet money on it. We have a hearing scheduled for May 14th. Show up, dress nicely, and let me do most of the talking. This should be quick." The months between March and May were relatively quiet, though I noticed a black SUV driving slowly past my house several times. I could not prove it was Patricia or another board member, but the timing seemed suspicious. I also heard from Mr. Henderson that someone had been asking around the neighborhood about me, wanting to know if I ran a business from my property or had any other potential violations. I kept detailed notes of everything, just in case. May 14th arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, a perfect spring day in Maine. I put on my best suit, which I had not worn since my cousin's wedding 2 years ago, and drove to the courthouse in Holton. Mark met me outside, carrying a briefcase and looking confident. "Ready?" he asked. "Absolutely." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed quietly. Judge Walter Montgomery presided, an older gentleman with silver hair and a reputation, according to Mark, for having no patience for nonsense. Patricia Newsome was there with her attorney, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who probably charged $500 an hour. Patricia looked furious when she saw me, like my mere existence was a personal insult. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Montgomery entered. We all stood, then sat when instructed. The judge reviewed some papers on his bench, then looked up. "This is the case of Whitmore versus Pinecrest Hills Homeowners Association. Mr. Davidson, this is your motion. Please proceed." Mark stood and approached the podium. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is straightforward. My client, Brandon Whitmore, owns property on Maple Ridge Road, Parcel 14. The defendant HOA claims jurisdiction over his property and has attempted to levy fines. However, the HOA's own covenant documents, filed with the county in 2018, explicitly define their jurisdiction as parcels 47 through 92 on the south side of Route 1. My client's property is not within those boundaries. We have certified maps and documents proving this. The HOA has no legal authority over Mr. Whitmore's property, and we are asking the court to declare this officially and order them to cease their harassment." Mark presented all the documents I had gathered, plus additional research he had done. The maps were blown up and shown on a screen. It was visually obvious that my property was nowhere near the HOA's boundaries. The HOA's attorney, Mr. Henderson, stood next. "Your Honor, while it is true that Mr. Whitmore's parcel is not explicitly listed in the original filing, we believe there was an administrative error. The intent was always to include all properties in the general vicinity. We are asking the court to allow us to amend our covenants to properly reflect this intent." Judge Montgomery leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Henderson, are you seriously asking me to retroactively change the boundaries of your HOA covenants to include a property that was never part of the original agreement? We believe it is in the interest of community standards and property values, Your Honor." "That is not how property law works, Counselor. You do not get to unilaterally expand your jurisdiction because you feel like it. These covenants are legal documents with specific boundaries. If Mr. Whitmore's property was not included in 2018, then it is not subject to your rules. Period." Henderson tried to argue further, bringing up the spirit and intent argument again, but Judge Montgomery cut him off. "I have heard enough. The law is clear here. Mr. Whitmore's property, Parcel 14 on Maple Ridge Road, is not within the boundaries of the Pinecrest Hills HOA as filed with Aroostook County. The HOA has no jurisdiction, no authority, and no right to levy fines or restrictions on his property. The plaintiff's motion for declaratory judgment is granted." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Mark was grinning beside me, but the judge was not done. He looked directly at Patricia and her attorney. "Furthermore, I am troubled by the fact that this HOA attempted to enforce violations and levy fines against someone clearly outside their jurisdiction. This shows either gross incompetence or willful overreach. I am ordering the defendant to pay Mr. Whitmore's attorney fees and costs. Additionally, the HOA is prohibited from any further contact with Mr. Whitmore regarding property violations, assessments, or any other matter. If they violate this order, they will face contempt charges." Patricia looked like she had been slapped. Her attorney was furiously scribbling notes, probably trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. "Is there anything else, Mr. Davidson?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor, thank you." "Then we are adjourned." Outside the courthouse, I shook Mark's hand enthusiastically. "That was incredible. Thank you. You did the hard work gathering all that evidence. I just presented it. Judges love cases like this where the facts are clear and one side is obviously in the wrong. You should receive a written order within a week, and then the HOA will have to cut you a check for our fees. You think they will actually comply? They do not have a choice. If they do not pay, we can go after their accounts, and if they contact you again, let me know immediately. Violating a court order is serious business. I drove home feeling better than I had in months. The spring air coming through my truck windows smelled like freedom. Max greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm, and I gave him an extra treat to celebrate. The written order arrived the following week, officially declaring that my property was not within the HOA's jurisdiction and ordering them to pay my attorney fees, which totaled about $1,800. I framed a copy of the order and hung it in my garage, right above where I stored my snow removal equipment. I thought that was truly the end of it. But Patricia Newsome was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. It started small. My mailbox was knocked over one night in early June. I figured it was kids being stupid, so I fixed it and moved on. Then my trash cans were dumped in my driveway while I was at work. Again, annoying but not worth calling the police over. But when I found nails scattered across the bottom of my driveway, clearly intended to puncture my tires, I knew this was not random. I called the Aroostook County Sheriff's Office and filed a report. Deputy Sarah Collins came out to take my statement. She was professional and thorough, taking photos of the nails and the tire marks where someone had deliberately driven through my property. "You have any idea who might be doing this?" she asked. "I have a suspicion, but no proof." I explained the HOA situation and the recent court case. "There is a woman named Patricia Newsome who was pretty angry about losing. You have security cameras." "Not yet, but I am going to install some." "Good idea. Keep documenting everything. If this continues, we can investigate further, but right now it is hard to prove who is responsible." I spent the next weekend installing a comprehensive security camera system. 4 cameras covered my driveway, garage, and the perimeter of my house. Everything was connected to my phone with motion alerts and cloud recording. If someone came onto my property again, I would have video evidence. I did not have to wait long. 3 nights later, at 2:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I grabbed it and watched the live feed. A black SUV had pulled into my driveway with its headlights off. Someone in dark clothing got out and approached my garage. I was already calling the sheriff's office as I pulled on jeans and shoes. "This is Brandon Whitmore at 42 Maple Ridge Road. Someone is on my property right now, attempting to vandalize my garage. I have them on camera." "Stay inside, Mr. Whitmore. We are sending a deputy now." I watched on my phone as the figure spray painted something on my garage door, then hurried back to the SUV. They started the engine, but by then I could hear sirens in the distance. The SUV peeled out of my driveway, turning south toward Route 1. Deputy Collins arrived within 5 minutes, followed by another sheriff's vehicle. I met them outside with my phone, showing them the recorded video. "Can you see the license plate?" Deputy Collins asked. I replayed the footage. "There, when they back up." "It is a little blurry, but you can make out most of it." She wrote down the numbers. "Okay, we will run this. And what did they spray paint?" I had not looked yet. We walked around to see the garage door illuminated by flashlights. In large red letters, someone had sprayed "scofflaw" across the white paint. "That is an interesting choice of insults," the other deputy said. "It is related to the HOA case," I explained. "They think I am evading rules." Deputy Collins took more photos and statements. "We will follow up on the license plate and let you know what we find. Make sure you save that video footage." The next afternoon, Deputy Collins called me. "Mr. Whitmore, we traced the license plate. The vehicle is registered to Patricia Newsome." I felt vindication and anger in equal measure. "So what happens now?" We tried to contact her, but she is not answering. We left messages asking her to come to the station to discuss the incident. Depending on her response, we may charge her with criminal mischief and trespassing. I want to press charges. Understood. We will keep you updated." 2 days passed with no word. Then Mark Davidson called me with surprising news. "Brandon, I just got a very interesting phone call from the HOA's attorney. Apparently, Patricia Newsome has resigned from the board effective immediately, and they are offering to settle any outstanding issues with you." "What kind of settlement?" "They want to pay for the damage to your garage, issue a formal apology, and pay an additional $5,000 to resolve any potential claims you might have against them or Miss Newsome personally. She vandalized my property on camera. Why would I settle when she could face criminal charges?" "That is entirely your choice. I am just relaying the offer. My guess is they are worried about liability. If she was acting as HOA chairwoman when she did this, the HOA itself could be on the hook for damages. They want to make this go away quietly." I thought about it. "What do you think I should do?" "Honestly, you could push for criminal charges and probably win, but that is a long process and you might end up with just a fine and probation for her. The settlement gives you money now and a formal acknowledgement that they were wrong. Plus, you would still have the video evidence if she ever bothers you again. I want the apology in writing, notarized, and I want it posted on their community board for at least 6 months. And I want 7,000, not 5, Mark chuckled. "I will relay that to them." The HOA agreed to my terms within 24 hours. The settlement was drawn up, signed, and executed within a week. I received a check for $7,000, which more than covered my legal fees, security system, and garage repair. The written apology was professionally printed and posted at the Pinecrest Hills Community Center, where every resident would see it coming and going. As for Patricia Newsome, she apparently left town shortly after resigning. According to neighborhood gossip that Mr. Henderson shared, she had moved to Florida to live with her sister. The new HOA board chairperson was a reasonable man named Tom, who sent me a personal note apologizing for the entire situation and assuring me that I would never be contacted by them again. The criminal mischief charges were ultimately dropped as part of the settlement agreement, which I agreed to reluctantly. Deputy Collins told me that while she understood my frustration, the settlement was probably the best outcome I could hope for in practical terms. Life returned to normal after that. Summer in Maine was beautiful, and I spent my time working on my property, hiking with Max, and enjoying the freedom of living without an HOA breathing down my neck. The irony was not lost on me that Patricia had been so obsessed with her aesthetic standards and rules that she had ended up committing a crime and losing everything. My garage door got a fresh coat of paint, and I installed a small sign next to it that read, "HOA Free Zone." It made me smile every time I saw it. The security cameras stayed up and I kept them well maintained. You never knew when they might come in handy again. In late August, I ran into Tyler at the gas station again. "Hey, Mr. Whitmore, I heard you took on the HOA and won. That is awesome." "Thanks, Tyler. It was definitely an experience. My cousin in Pinecrest Hills said things have gotten way better since Patricia left. The new board is actually reasonable. They even voted to reduce some of the fines and relax some rules." "That is good to hear. Everyone deserves to enjoy their property without someone dictating every little detail." Amen to that. As September rolled around and the first hints of fall color appeared on the trees, I started preparing for winter. I brought out my snow removal equipment for maintenance, checking the plow blade for damage and servicing the snow blower engine. It felt good to do this without any anxiety about fines or violation notices. Mr. Henderson came over one afternoon while I was working. "That is some nice equipment you have got there." "Thanks. Essential for Maine winters." I heard about your legal battle. I should have warned you earlier that Patricia was extending her reach beyond where she had any right. She tried to cite me once for my auto shop, claimed it was not allowed in a residential zone. I told her to get lost. I wish I had known there were others she had targeted. Most people just ignored her, but you actually fought back and won. That took guts. We talked for a while about property rights and the dangers of overzealous HOAs. Mr. Henderson had lived in Maine his entire life and valued independence above almost everything else. He appreciated that I had stood my ground. The first snow came in late October, earlier than usual. I was ready. My equipment worked perfectly, and I cleared my driveway and even helped Mrs. Chen with hers. She brought me a homemade apple pie as thanks, which Max and I enjoyed thoroughly. In November, I received an unexpected letter from the new Pinecrest Hills HOA board. For a moment, my heart rate spiked, thinking they were going to restart the harassment. But the letter was actually an invitation. Dear Mr. Whitmore, we would like to invite you to our annual Thanksgiving community dinner as a guest of honor. We understand that you are not part of our HOA and we respect that. However, we want to extend an olive branch and acknowledge the mistakes that were made by previous leadership. We hope you will join us for food, fellowship, and a fresh start. Sincerely, Tom Richardson, Board Chair. I showed the letter to Mark when we met for lunch a few days later. What do you think? Is this legitimate or some kind of trap? Mark read it over. Sounds genuine to me. Tom Richardson is a retired teacher, by the way, decent guy from what I have heard. I think they really are trying to turn over a new leaf. Should I go? That is up to you, but it might be a nice gesture. Show that you are not holding a grudge against the community, just the specific people who wronged you. I decided to accept the invitation. The dinner was held on the Saturday before Thanksgiving at the community center. I arrived with a store-bought pumpkin pie, not wanting to show up empty-handed. The place was packed with families, kids running around, and tables full of food. Tom Richardson spotted me immediately and came over with a warm smile. He was probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Brandon, thank you so much for coming. I know we have a lot to make up for. I appreciate the invitation. Let me introduce you to some people. Tom walked me around, introducing me to various residents. Most were friendly and curious, having heard about the legal case. A few apologized for Patricia's behavior, saying they had no idea what was happening until after the fact. One woman, probably in her 30s, approached me with genuine emotion in her voice. Mr. Whitmore, I just want to thank you. After your case, the new board reviewed all the outstanding fines and violations. They found that Patricia had been making up rules that were not even in our actual covenants. My fine for having the wrong curtains got rescinded. You standing up to her helped a lot of us. I am glad something good came from it. The dinner itself was pleasant. The food was excellent, and the company was surprisingly enjoyable. These were not bad people, just folks who had gotten stuck with terrible leadership. The new board seemed committed to running things fairly and following the actual rules as written. As the evening wound down, Tom pulled me aside. Brandon, I want you to know that we have amended our procedures. Every violation notice now requires board approval and verification against our actual covenants. We also created an appeals process that is actually fair. What happened to you will not happen again, not on my watch. That is good to hear, Tom. I genuinely hope things work out for your community. And if you ever change your mind about joining, you would be welcome, though I completely understand if you prefer your independence. I appreciate that, but I bought my property specifically because it was not part of an HOA. No offense. Tom laughed. None taken, I get it. Hell, if I had the choice, I might have done the same. Driving home that night, I felt a sense of closure that I had not expected. The whole ordeal had been stressful and infuriating, but it had also taught me the importance of standing up for your rights. Too many people would have just paid the fine to make the problem go away, even though they were in the right. I had fought back and not only won, but potentially helped others in the process. December brought heavy snow, and my equipment got a serious workout. I found a rhythm to the work, clearing my driveway early each morning before the sun came up. There was something meditative about it, the scrape of the blade on pavement, the roar of the snow blower, the satisfaction of a job well done. Just before Christmas, I received my final piece of correspondence from the Pinecrest Hills HOA. It was a holiday card signed by Tom and the entire board, wishing me well and thanking me again for my patience during their transition. Inside was a $50 gift card to the local hardware store with a note. For snow removal equipment maintenance. Keep up the good work. I could not help but smile. It was a thoughtful gesture that showed how much had changed. I used the gift card to buy new blades for my plow and some extra fuel stabilizer for my snow blower. Practical gifts for practical needs. Christmas Day was quiet. I video called my parents in Vermont and my sister in New Hampshire. We talked about the HOA situation, which had become something of a family legend. My dad, a retired contractor, was particularly proud that I had fought back. Too many of these HOAs think they can do whatever they want, he said. You showed them that property rights actually mean something. I had good documentation and a good lawyer. That made all the difference. No, you had the courage to fight. A lot of people would have given up. As the year came to a close, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. It had started with a ridiculous fine in February and ended with a victory in court, a settlement, and even a strange sort of reconciliation. The experience had tested me in ways I had not expected, forcing me to navigate legal systems, stand up to bullies, and trust in the justice system. The new year arrived with a massive blizzard that dumped 2 feet of snow overnight. I was out at dawn with my equipment, clearing my driveway and helping neighbors. Mr. Henderson stopped by around noon with thermoses of hot coffee. "Hell of a storm," he said, handing me a cup. "Good thing we have the right equipment," I replied, gesturing to my snow blower. "Good thing you fought for your right to keep it visible. Imagine if you had to hide this stuff because some HOA said it was not pretty enough. I would rather not imagine that." We stood there drinking coffee and watching the snow continue to fall. It was a perfect Maine moment, the kind of simple satisfaction that came from being prepared and self-sufficient. This was exactly why I had bought property outside of planned communities and HOA control. In January, I got a call from a reporter at the Bangor Daily News. Someone had tipped them off about my case, and they wanted to do a story about HOA overreach in Maine. I agreed to an interview, figuring it might help other people who found themselves in similar situations. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica, came to my house with a photographer. We talked for over an hour about everything that had happened. She was particularly interested in the legal aspects and the fact that the HOA had tried to enforce rules over property they had no jurisdiction over. "You think this is a growing problem?" she asked. "I think HOAs serve a purpose in some communities, but they need proper oversight and accountability. In my case, one person had too much power, and no one was checking whether she was following the actual rules. That is a recipe for abuse." The article ran in early February, almost exactly 1 year after I had received that first violation notice. It was fair and thorough, including comments from Tom Richardson about the reforms they had implemented. The online version got hundreds of comments from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. I got several calls and emails from other property owners in Maine asking for advice on dealing with their HOAs. I referred them to Mark Davidson and shared the basic lesson. Document everything, verify the legal boundaries, and do not be afraid to fight back if you are in the right. One particularly satisfying message came from someone in southern Maine who had checked their property records after reading the article and discovered that their HOA was also claiming jurisdiction over land they did not actually control. They were planning to file a similar lawsuit. I wished them luck. Spring arrived slowly, as it always did in northern Maine. The snow gradually melted, revealing my lawn and the flower beds that Mrs. Chen had helped me plant the previous year. Max spent hours outside chasing squirrels and enjoying the warmer weather. On the anniversary of the court hearing in May, Mark called me. "Hey Brandon, I just wanted to check in. How is everything going?" Quiet, which is exactly how I like it. No more HOA problems. None. Tom and his board have been respectful. They even invited me to their 4th of July cookout, though I politely declined. Nothing wrong with maintaining boundaries. Listen, I wanted to tell you that I have had 3 more cases similar to yours in the past year. Word got out that HOAs cannot just claim whatever property they want. You started something. I just wanted to keep my snow blower in my garage, and in doing so, you reminded people that property rights matter. That is not nothing. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. It was strange to think that my stubborn refusal to pay an unjust fine had inspired other people to stand up for themselves. But it felt good, like something meaningful had come from all the stress and frustration. Summer settled in with long, beautiful days. I worked on various projects around my property, building a new deck and installing raised garden beds. Mr. Henderson helped me with some of the heavier work, and we became good friends. He shared stories about old Caribou before the developments and HOAs, when people just lived their lives without permission from community boards. In August, I was working in my garden when a car pulled into my driveway. For a moment, my guard went up, old instincts from the HOA battle. But it was just a young couple, looking nervous but excited. "Hi, are you Brandon Whitmore?" the man asked. "That is me. Can I help you? My name is David, and this is my wife, Rachel. We are looking at property in this area, and someone mentioned your name. They said you successfully fought off an HOA that was trying to claim jurisdiction over properties they did not actually control." "That is true. What can I do for you?" Rachel spoke up. "We found a house we really love on Ridge View Road, but the listing agent mentioned that it might be subject to Pinecrest Hills HOA. We specifically want to avoid HOAs. Is there a way to verify whether a property is actually subject to their rules?" I invited them inside and spent the next hour walking them through exactly what I had done, checking the county records, getting certified copies of the HOA covenant filing, verifying parcel numbers and boundaries. I showed them my documentation and explained how to do the same research. "This is incredibly helpful," David said. "We never would have known to check this carefully." A lot of people do not. Real estate agents do not always disclose this information properly, and HOAs sometimes claim more than they actually control. Always verify for yourself. They left with pages of notes and genuine gratitude. I hope they found their perfect property without HOA complications. They seemed like good people who just wanted to live peacefully, same as me. Fall arrived again, bringing the spectacular color change that made Maine famous. I took Max on long hikes through the woods, enjoying the crisp air and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Life had settled into a comfortable routine, free from the drama of violation notices and legal battles. In October, I attended the town council meeting in Caribou for the first time. They were discussing proposed zoning changes, and I wanted to make sure nothing would affect my property. The meeting was long and sometimes contentious, but it was democracy in action. People caring about their community and having their say. During public comment, I stood up and introduced myself. My name is Brandon Whitmore, and I live on Maple Ridge Road. I just want to say that I appreciate the town's clear zoning rules and property records. Last year, I had an issue with an HOA trying to claim jurisdiction over my property, and the accurate county records were essential in resolving that dispute. I hope the town continues to maintain these records carefully and make them accessible to property owners. The council chair thanked me, and several people nodded in agreement. After the meeting, a couple of council members came up to talk. They were aware of my case and agreed that clear property records protected everyone. November brought early snow again, and I was ready. My equipment was maintained and prepared. The first storm of the season arrived on Thanksgiving weekend, and I spent Friday morning clearing driveways for myself and several neighbors. It was hard work, but satisfying. Mrs. Chen brought me tea and cookies that afternoon. "You are a good neighbor, Brandon. I am glad you fought that HOA and stayed here." "I am glad too, Mrs. Chen. This is home." December was busy with holiday preparations and more snow. I strung lights on my house, hung a wreath on my garage door, and decorated a tree inside. Max loved the chaos of it all, especially when I let him wear a ridiculous reindeer antler headband for a photo that I sent to my family on Christmas Eve. I noticed a package on my doorstep that had not come from a delivery service. Inside was a bottle of local maple syrup and a card signed by Tom Richardson and several other Pinecrest Hills residents. The message was simple: "Thank you for your grace and patience. Wishing you a wonderful holiday season." It was a small gesture, but it meant something. These people had made a genuine effort to make amends and move forward. I appreciated that, even if I had no interest in ever joining their HOA. The second anniversary of the original violation notice arrived in February. It felt surreal that 2 years had passed. The experience had changed me in subtle ways. I was more aware of my property rights, more willing to stand up for myself, and more appreciative of the freedom that came with living outside of restrictive community rules. I never heard from Patricia Newsome again. According to the rumor mill, she was still in Florida and had no plans to return to Maine. That was fine with me. I bore her no real ill will at this point, just relief that she was gone and unable to cause further trouble. Mark and I met for lunch one day in late February. "You know, Brandon, your case has become something I reference with other clients. It is a perfect example of why documentation matters and why you should not back down when you are in the right. I am glad something good came from it, though I would have preferred to avoid the whole situation." "Of course, but once you were in it, you handled it perfectly. A lot of people would have either paid the fine or gotten so angry they made mistakes. You stayed calm, gathered evidence, and let the law work. I had a good lawyer. You had clear facts on your side. That is what really mattered." We finished lunch and parted ways. I drove home through light snow, thinking about how much had changed and yet how much had stayed the same. I still lived in the same house, worked the same job, and enjoyed the same simple pleasures. The HOA battle had been a disruption, but it had not defined my life. Spring came again, my third spring in this house, and I focused on new projects. I built a shed for my tools, expanded my garden, and adopted a kitten that Max reluctantly accepted. Life moved forward in the quiet, steady way that I preferred. In April, I received an invitation to speak at a property rights seminar in Bangor. The organizers had read about my case and thought I could offer valuable insights. I was hesitant at first, not being much of a public speaker, but Mark encouraged me to do it. The seminar was on a Saturday morning, attended by about 50 people. I told my story from beginning to end, emphasizing the importance of checking property records and not assuming that organizations like HOAs have the authority they claim. People asked questions, took notes, and several approached me afterward to share their own stories. One older gentleman shook my hand firmly. "Young man, you did what a lot of us were too tired or scared to do. Thank you for fighting back and showing that it can be done." It was not easy, but it was worth it. Driving home that afternoon, I felt a sense of completion. The ordeal that had started with a ridiculous fine about snow removal equipment had somehow turned into something bigger. I had stood up for property rights, helped other people understand their options, and come out stronger on the other side. Summer brought long days working outside, swimming in a nearby lake and grilling dinners for friends. Mr. Henderson and I built a fire pit between our properties where we could sit on cool evenings and talk about everything and nothing. Mrs. Chen joined us sometimes with her pottery projects, working on her wheel while Max played nearby. On the 4th of July, I watched fireworks from my back deck. I could hear the Pinecrest Hills community celebration in the distance, music and laughter carrying on the evening breeze. I had no regrets about not being part of their community. This independence, this freedom to live as I chose, was exactly what I wanted. August rolled around warm and humid. I spent time maintaining my property and helping friends with various projects. The security cameras I had installed during the HOA conflict now just captured wildlife mostly, deer and foxes, and the occasional moose passing through. I kept them running, though, a reminder that preparation and vigilance mattered. In September, Tom Richardson stopped by unexpectedly. "Brandon, I hope I am not intruding. I was in the neighborhood and wanted to check in." "Not at all. Want some coffee?" We sat on my new deck, drinking coffee and talking. Tom told me that the HOA was doing well, running smoothly with clear rules and fair enforcement. They had not had any major conflicts since implementing the reforms after Patricia's departure. "I wanted to thank you again," Tom said. "Your lawsuit was a wake-up call. It forced us to examine how we were operating and make real changes. We are a better community because of it." "I appreciate you saying that. I never wanted to hurt the community, just protect my own property rights." "You did both. Sometimes organizations need someone to stand up and say, 'No, this is not right.' You were that person for us." After Tom left, I sat on the deck for a while longer, reflecting on his words. It was validating to hear that the conflict had led to positive change, not just for me but for others. Sometimes fighting back against injustice did more good than simply avoiding conflict. Fall arrived with its usual spectacular display. I took time to enjoy the changing leaves, the cooler temperatures, and the satisfaction of having survived another year in Maine. Max was getting older now, moving a bit slower, but still eager for our daily walks. The kitten, now grown into a full cat I had named Scout, had become his constant companion. October brought preparation for winter. I serviced my snow removal equipment, stocked up on supplies, and made sure everything was ready for the long, cold months ahead. This was the routine I loved, the self-sufficiency that came with rural Maine living. By November, I had been in this house for almost 4 years. The HOA conflict seemed like ancient history now, something that had happened to a different version of me. I was more confident, more knowledgeable about property law, and more connected to my community than ever before. The third Thanksgiving since the whole mess began was quiet and peaceful. I had dinner with Mr. Henderson and his wife, along with Mrs. Chen and a few other neighbors. We ate turkey and pie, watched football, and enjoyed each other's company. No one mentioned the HOA or the legal battle. That chapter was closed. Winter settled in with heavy snow and bitter cold. My equipment performed flawlessly, clearing my driveway and helping neighbors in need. This was what that original violation notice had been about. Equipment that was essential for life in Maine being deemed an aesthetic problem by someone who valued appearance over function. The absurdity of it still made me shake my head. Christmas came with visits from family. My parents drove up from Vermont, and my sister came from New Hampshire with her 2 kids. They loved the snow and the space, building snowmen and having sledding races down the hill behind my house. My nephews were fascinated by my snow removal equipment, asking endless questions about how it all worked. As midnight approached on December 31st, I stood outside with Max, watching the stars. Another year was ending, bringing me further from the conflict and closer to the peaceful life I had always wanted. The HOA violation notice that had disrupted everything was now just a story I told, a challenge I had overcome. The new year began with purpose and clarity. I had no grand resolutions, just a commitment to continue living honestly, standing up for what was right, and helping others when I could. The experience with the HOA had taught me that ordinary people could fight back against organizations that overstepped their authority. It just took courage, documentation, and persistence. In January, I ran into Tyler at the gas station again. He was working his way through community college now, studying business management. "Mr. Whitmore, hey, I have not seen you in a while, been keeping busy. How is school?" "Good. Actually, I am taking a business law class and we studied property rights and HOA cases. My professor used your case as an example of proper documentation and legal standing." "Really? That is wild." "Yeah, he said it was a textbook example of how to handle a jurisdiction dispute." Pretty cool that it happened right here in Caribou. We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways. It amazed me how far the story had spread and how many people had found value in what I had gone through. Something that started as personal frustration had become a teaching moment for others. February marked 3 years since that first violation notice arrived. I did not celebrate the anniversary, but I acknowledged it quietly. 3 years of peace, free from harassment and unjust fines. 3 years of living exactly as I chose on my own property. That was worth remembering. My life had found its rhythm again, the one that had been temporarily disrupted by Patricia Newsome and her overreaching HOA. I worked my job as an equipment mechanic at the local dealership, maintained my property, enjoyed time with Max and Scout, and appreciated the simple pleasures of rural Maine living. The snow removal equipment sat in my garage, visible and accessible, exactly as it should be. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized that the experience had been worth it despite the stress and anger. It had tested me and forced me to stand up for my rights in a way I had never done before. It had connected me with good people like Mark Davidson and Tom Richardson. It had even helped others facing similar situations find their own courage to fight back. The judge's revelation that my property was not in the HOA's jurisdiction had been the key moment, the factual foundation that made everything else possible. But the real victory was not just winning in court. It was standing firm when pressured, gathering evidence when challenged, and refusing to accept injustice simply because fighting back was difficult. Those lessons would stay with me forever. As winter turned toward spring once more, I found myself grateful for everything that had happened. Grateful for the challenge that made me stronger. Grateful for the victory that vindicated my position. Grateful for the peace that followed. Most of all, I was grateful for the freedom to live on my own terms, storing my snow removal equipment wherever I damn well pleased, on property that was mine and mine alone. The whole ordeal had started with snow removal equipment and ended with a clear legal declaration of my property rights. In between, there had been conflict, anger, vandalism, legal battles, and eventually resolution. But through it all, I had learned the most important lesson. When you are right, when you have facts on your side, when you refuse to back down against those who abuse their authority, justice can prevail. My snow blower and plow attachment remained in my garage, visible to anyone who drove by. They were more than just tools now. They were symbols of independence, reminders that property rights matter, and proof that one person standing firm can make a difference. Every time I looked at them, I remembered what I had fought for and won. And when the next storm rolled through, covering Maine in fresh snow, I would fire up that equipment with pride, knowing that I had earned the right to use it freely on my own land, answerable to no HOA, bound by no unjust restrictions, living exactly as I had always intended. Free.